Yesterday, Trump made a big show about bragging of the records. The market went partially back up after he crashed it. Well, today it went back down. It seemed like randomly assigning crushing tariffs to other countries would make everything better in the world. Turned out that was not the case.
Jimmy Kimmel reveals Trump tariff murder rise and runs the market into the ground again. It was another ordinary night on late-night television until it wasn't. What began as a monologue packed with the usual comedy and political jabs quickly took a darker, more serious turn when Jimmy Kimmel addressed something unexpected: a concerning connection between former President Donald Trump's renewed tariff threats and a reported uptick in violent crime statistics, specifically homicides. While such a claim might sound like a stretch at first glance, Kimmel's delivery wasn't in jest. This time he wasn't just aiming for laughs, he was sounding an alarm. The segment began with Kimmel joking about Trump's latest public appearance, poking fun at a recent rally where the former president once again promised to impose sweeping tariffs if re-elected, claiming it would bring manufacturing back and put America first again. But Kimmel, sitting at his desk, shifted tone as he looked directly into the camera. "We laugh about it," he said, "but here's the thing: these tariffs aren't just numbers. They have consequences. And some of those consequences are deadly." The audience fell quiet, unsure if this was part of a routine or the beginning of something more serious. It turned out to be the latter. Kimmel cited a recent report by a coalition of economists and public policy analysts who had analyzed the aftereffects of Trump's 2018 to 2019 tariffs on Chinese goods. According to the report, not only did the tariffs contribute to consumer price increases and supply chain disruptions, but they also had an indirect impact on social conditions, most notably, a measurable rise in violent crime in economically vulnerable areas. He referenced specific data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics that showed spikes in property crime and homicide rates in regions that experienced significant job losses due to retaliatory tariffs from China and other countries. Small towns dependent on agriculture and manufacturing were hit hardest. Kimmel read aloud a quote from the report: "In counties where exports decreased by 25% or more following the implementation of tariffs, the average homicide rate rose by 12% within a year." The audience was stunned, and Kimmel, clearly moved by the findings, didn't hold back. "We talk about economics like it's all dollars and cents," he said. "But when people lose their jobs, lose their homes, and lose stability, that desperation doesn't just disappear. It shows up in ER rooms, in police reports, and yes, in homicide statistics. These aren't just numbers. These are people." What made the segment particularly jarring wasn't just the topic. It was the fact that it came from Kimmel, someone known more for satire than policy breakdowns. But viewers soon realized this wasn't a fluke. Kimmel had done his homework. He brought up a 2020 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research, which linked economic shocks to increases in violent crime, particularly in low-income communities. He then connected the dots. Trump's aggressive trade policies, once lauded by his base as hardline negotiations, had created ripple effects that extended well beyond the stock market. And speaking of the market, Kimmel didn't stop with crime stats. He turned his attention to Wall Street's reaction to Trump's recent tariff threats. Within hours of the former president's renewed tariff proposal, the Dow had dropped nearly 600 points. Investors were spooked, not just by the economic implications but by the uncertainty that came with Trump's unpredictable policy shifts. Kimmel showed a clip from a financial news network where analysts warned that a second round of wide-reaching tariffs could send the U.S. economy into another period of inflationary pressure, something the country was only beginning to recover from. In a rare moment of seriousness, Kimmel offered a reflection. "We've seen what happens when policy is driven by impulse, by ego, by revenge disguised as strategy. And we've seen who pays the price. It's not the people at the top. It's the workers, the communities, the families left trying to figure out what to do when their local factory closes or their farm can't export soybeans anymore." He ended the segment with a quiet pause before saying, "I know this isn't the usual joke, but honestly, some things just aren't funny." The crowd, silent for most of the segment, erupted into applause, not the usual laughter, but a recognition of the gravity of what had just been shared. The online reaction was immediate. Clips of the monologue spread across social media, with hashtags like #KimmelTruth and #TariffFallout trending within hours. Viewers praised the late-night host for using his platform to highlight a story that had been largely ignored by mainstream news. Economists weighed in, supporting the data Kimmel cited and confirming that while his delivery was emotional, the facts were grounded in real research. Of course, not everyone agreed. Conservative pundits accused Kimmel of politicizing crime data and misrepresenting the cause and effect relationship between tariffs and homicides. One former Trump advisor called the segment Hollywood hysteria, dismissing the economic concerns as overblown and suggesting that Kimmel should stick to comedy. But for many, the damage had already been done. The links had been made, the data laid bare. In the days that followed, the stock market continued to fluctuate as uncertainty around future trade policy remained unresolved. Some economists issued statements reinforcing Kimmel's warning, noting that global investors were increasingly wary of a return to tariff-heavy strategies, especially in the absence of diplomatic coordination. Meanwhile, in communities across the Midwest and South, where the impact of previous tariffs still lingers, Kimmel's words hit home. Local papers began covering the story, quoting excerpts from his monologue and interviewing residents who had experienced firsthand the economic and social fallout of the trade war. For some, it was a moment of validation that someone with a national platform was finally connecting the dots between economic policy and real-world consequences. In the end, what began as a late-night talk show joke turned into one of the most talked-about economic commentaries in recent memory. Whether or not it shifts public opinion remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: Jimmy Kimmel used his voice to do more than entertain. He used it to inform. And in doing so, he reminded viewers that even behind the most technical policy decisions, there are human lives affected, sometimes tragically so.